Right, we are going to get some reaction now to Manchester City being knocked out of the Club World Cup. Kaveh Solikol, our chief correspondent, is there for us. And Kaveh, Manchester City, up until a couple of hours ago, it looked fairly good in this tournament. What on earth happened out there?
Well, it was an absolutely extraordinary game. A game that Manchester City really should have won. I think they had the players to win the game, but I'm not sure they had the right tactics or the right strategy. And they played into Al-Hilal's hands, because the way Al-Hilal want to play a game when they're facing a side as good as Manchester City is to defend deep and hit their opponents on the break. And that is exactly what they did, and they're devastating on the break. City basically spent the whole game camped outside Al-Hilal's penalty area, and when they were unable to break through, Al-Hilal basically hit them on the break. And you have to say, at the end of the day, Al-Hilal deserved their victory. It was an absolute masterclass in attacking football from them, and also a masterclass in defending. And I think it really tells you that Saudi Arabian football is perhaps a little better than people give it credit for. When we talk about Saudi Arabian football, we always talk about money, we always talk about transfers, we always talk about the massive wages that are on offer there as well. But I do think that something is happening in Saudi Arabia. Their football is developing fast, and Al-Hilal so far in this tournament have been unbeaten. And they've come up against sides like Real Madrid. They've beaten Manchester City tonight. And I think now there's a chance that they could make it all the way to the final. Because if you look at the draw, their next game is against Fluminense of Brazil here in Orlando. And then they will face either Chelsea or Palmeiras. And if they get past either of those two sides, then they will be in the final in New York, New Jersey.
Late night out there for you, isn't it, Kaveh? Very early in the morning. We know that these post-match interviews take a little bit of time to come through, don't they? So how did Pep Guardiola and his players seem afterwards?
Well, Pep Guardiola was shell-shocked in his news conference. He basically said, we were here to win this tournament. We desperately wanted to win the tournament. We are the defending world champions. We weren't in the US for a holiday. This was not a pre-season training camp. We were taking this competition very, very seriously. And it just looked like Pep Guardiola didn't have an answer to the way Al-Hilal were playing. He made lots of substitutions, made lots of changes. Rodri came on, then he went off. Phil Foden came on, Shirky came on, Mamouche came on, but still the pattern of the game didn't change. Perhaps what Manchester City needed to do is let Al-Hilal have the ball or defend a little bit deeper, because the whole game, exactly the same thing was happening. Manchester City had the ball, they weren't able to break through, and Al-Hilal would hit them on the break. So Pep Guardiola was shell-shocked. He was trying to sort of work out what had happened. And as for the players, we spoke to Bernardo Silva afterwards, and you could tell from his expression, you could tell from the way he was talking that he was very, very frustrated about the way the game had panned out. He simply could not understand why City could not get to grips with the way Al-Hilal were counter-attacking. And he was also very upset about the fact that City had been knocked out of this tournament. He made it very clear. He said, look, this feels on par with being knocked out of the Champions League. There is no silver lining to this. We are not happy that we are leaving this tournament early and we'll be going on holiday and we need a rest and we need to recharge our batteries. Far from it. He said, we were here in the US to win this tournament, to defend our title as world champions, and we fell short. We simply weren't good enough, and Al-Hilal were better than us on the night.
Kaveh, you touched on it a little bit earlier, you know, where Saudi Arabian football sits, what this does. I mean, only a couple of days ago, Cristiano Ronaldo saying, you know, you've all underestimated how good this league is. So can you just put this into a little bit of context for us?
I think it's probably the best result in the history of Asian club football. I don't think it's the best result in the history of Asian football, because if you go back a couple of years to the World Cup in Qatar in 2022, Saudi Arabia beat Argentina, who ended up winning that World Cup. So most Saudi Arabian football supporters you would speak to would say that is the best result ever in the history of Saudi Arabian football. But when it comes to club football, I think this comes very, very close to that win for Saudi Arabia against Argentina. Al-Hilal are arguably the biggest club in Saudi Arabia. Their fans would tell you that they have more supporters than any other side in Saudi Arabia. And speaking to some of the Saudi journalists who are here in the US, they are telling me that people in Saudi Arabia are going crazy for this Club World Cup. They know that the tournament has its critics, especially in Europe, but they have embraced it. And for them, it's something very, very special for a team from Asia to play a side like Manchester City, not in a friendly, but in a competitive game. And make no mistake, this was a very, very competitive game. You could tell by the way the players were celebrating the goals. Even when City took an early lead, their players were celebrating like they'd scored a winner in a Premier League game. It means a lot to them. And of course, the way Al-Hilal were celebrating their goals tells you all you need to know about how important this is for them. There were extraordinary scenes at the end of the game, actually, because City players, a lot of them sank to their knees in despair, whereas a lot of the Al-Hilal players were sinking to their knees in disbelief. And the president of the club was waiting for them on the touchline. It took about half an hour for all their players to leave the pitch. But make no mistake, this is a very, very special night for Saudi Arabian football. And one of their players, the midfielder Sergei Milenkovic-Savic, we were speaking to him afterwards, and he said to the journalists in the mix zone, he addressed us all and he said to us, do you remember 2 years ago, you were all criticizing me for going to Saudi Arabia. You were saying that I was only going to Saudi Arabia for the money. Well, are you still criticizing me? Do you still think I only went for the money? Because look how we played tonight. We beat the world champions, Manchester City.